framework that we'll use to discuss development is an adapted version of Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. Erikson's theory describes the impact of social experience across the lifespan and the core developmental challenge for each age range. He describes this in terms of key conflicts that a person experiences at each stage of development. For the purpose of this training, we've simplified Erikson's stages into the primary task for each developmental stage. In infancy, which is typically aged 0 to 18 months, the central task is developing a sense of trust. And the existential question experienced by the person is, can I trust the world? In early childhood, from approximately 2 to 4 years old, children are tasked with developing a sense of autonomy. They are asking themselves, is it okay to be me? Preschool-age children, approximately 4 to 5 years old, are developing a sense of initiative and are asking themselves, is it okay for me to do, move, and act? School-age children, from 5 to 12 years old, are developing a sense of industry and asking themselves, can I make it in the world? Adolescents, from 13 to 19 years old, are developing a sense of identity and asking themselves, who am I and who can I be? Early adulthood, from 20 to 39 years old, developing a sense of intimacy and asking themselves, can I love? Adults, from approximately 40 to 64 years old, are developing a sense of generativity and asking themselves, can I make my life count? And late adulthood, from 65 until death, are developing a sense of ego integrity and asking themselves, is it okay to have been me? Note that this framework might not apply to families whose sociocultural context is different than the mainstream context in the United States. One could argue that Erikson's developmental challenges are based on Eurocentric paradigms. Developmental abilities and expectations are influenced by cultural values and the socio-political and economic context. It is important to explore the cultural values of each individual person and family that you work with. For example, traditionally collectivistic cultures may not value individual identity development and separation from family as much as more individualistic cultures. Given differences in developmental levels of adults with IDD, the trauma symptoms they experience may vary depending on the age and developmental level of the person when they experienced the trauma. There are certain periods, special times during the brain's development, when it is most open to certain kinds of learning and development. When trauma occurs during one of these periods, it may show itself in specific ways. We will discuss the impact of trauma experienced across the lifespan to help us understand how an adult with IDD who experienced trauma early in life may have been affected. Early childhood, about birth through the preschool years, is crucial for the development of brain pathways that help children process what they see and hear, enable children to recognize, analyze, and respond to emotional cues, and enable children to become attached to their primary caregiver, the person on whom they depend on for survival. As infants develop into young children, they begin to develop greater independence, and their capacity to assess danger increases as they test new limits. Young children also begin to develop a sense of self, their self-concept and self-esteem, which gains greater momentum during middle childhood. Early childhood is also a time of great motor and language development. Some examples that may be present in young children are strong physiological and sensory reactions, becoming passive, quiet, or easily alarmed or startled, and expressing confusion about assessing threats and finding protection. Young children may engage in regressive behaviors, and bedwetting is a common symptom. Given their lack of understanding of cause and/or effect, most young children will blame themselves for the traumatic event. One of the most significant developmental milestones of young children is developing secure attachments with caregivers, and as such, trauma symptoms often manifest with significant issues with attachment, including rejecting contact and avoiding being touched, being confused about what's dangerous and whom to go to for protection, particularly if the trauma was at the hands of a caregiver. They may be clingy and resist being separated from familiar adults or places where they feel safe. When traumatic experiences are the result of interactions with parents or caregivers, the impact on development at this young age can be particularly significant, especially on developmental tasks like attachment. For a person with IDD who experienced trauma as a young child, they may have more difficulty calming down after being scared, and it may be harder to reassure him or her. Their ability to communicate verbally may be limited by the IDD. Even for typical children, there has been a myth that young children do not experience trauma because they are too young to know. This type of bias may be heightened for a child with IDD, resulting in a lifetime of untreated trauma. The person may use behaviors such as withdrawal or become less responsive as a way to communicate fear, terror, and feeling unsafe. Developmental gains are at times more fragile for children with IDD. Following a traumatic experience, loss of recent gains, such as occupational skills, may be even more dramatic, or they may lose even older gains. Additionally, the person may experience and express more negative affect, have more trouble interacting with peers, may become more aggressive, may develop new fears, and may be more behaviorally or emotionally dysregulated. During the school years, the brain starts building the pathways that help children do more conscious, rational processing of their experiences. This growth enables them to manage fears, anxieties, and aggression, focus their attention on learning and problem solving, control their impulses, and manage their physical reactions to perceived dangers. Children in middle childhood loosen their rigid views on such topics as fairness and consequences. They develop higher-level thinking about right and wrong as moral development increases. They move from, I could get into trouble for this, to, I'm behaving because it is the right thing to do. Middle childhood is also the time when children begin to develop a greater self-concept. Their evaluation of themselves is what determines their self-esteem. They can evaluate their physical, emotional, academic, and social skills and make judgments about whether they are good or not at certain tasks. They may say, I'm a good student, but a bad athlete. They develop this sense of awareness of themselves by comparing themselves to their peers and with inputs from parents, teachers, and other caregivers. During middle childhood, children receive emotional support, learn different points of view, and share their thoughts and feelings with newfound friends. Children begin to test their communication and social interaction skills with their friends. Children learn how to manage their emotions and get along with others through friendships. The development of friendships is highly dependent on a sense of mutual trust. Usually friendships at this age are between children of the same gender. The trauma symptoms that may be present in school-age children include attention problems related to experiencing unwanted and intrusive thoughts and images, or sleep disturbances, becoming preoccupied with frightening moments from the traumatic experience, replaying the traumatic events in their mind in order to figure out what they could have prevented or how it could have been different, developing intense, specific new fears linking back to the original danger, alternating between demonstrating shy and withdrawn behavior and unusually aggressive behavior, becoming so fearful of reoccurrence that they avoid previously enjoyed activities, and having thoughts of revenge. An adult with IDD who has experienced trauma in middle childhood may react in a number of ways. If the trauma was unrecognized or the effect underappreciated, these acting out behaviors may have resulted in labels like ADHD, conduct disorder, or challenging behaviors. They may have reduced receptive and expressive language skills that make it difficult to communicate about ongoing intrusive thoughts and images about the traumatic experience. Additionally, this preoccupation may heighten learning challenges, which may have already needed additional attention because of the IDD. They may become withdrawn and quiet at some times and have tantrum-like behavior that is out of sync with their age, much like a younger child at other times. They may have lost developmental gains they achieved years ago, such as toilet training. They may have even more exaggerated difficulties with precision learning, such as math, that require focused attention. They may have difficulty with peer relationships and vulnerability to persistent teasing, bullying, or isolation from peers. During adolescence, the brain continues to build connections and pathways that enable young people to think abstractly, imagine the future and anticipate and consider the consequences of their behavior, make realistic appraisals of what's dangerous and what's safe, and alter their current behaviors in order to meet their long-term goals. The major task facing adolescents and into young adulthood is to create a stable identity and to become a mature and productive adult. Adolescent development relies upon what is learned in the course of relationships and through past experiences. Youth use these experiences and beliefs as a basis upon which to define themselves, make judgments about the world, and develop relationships with others. A child's identity is oftentimes an extension of one's parents and family. During adolescence, an individual recognizes his or her uniqueness and ability to define oneself as separate and different from one's background. An adolescent may have the opportunity to redefine his or her own identity. Mentors and role models can be very important to this process. At no other time since birth does an individual undergo such rapid and profound physical changes as during early adolescence. Puberty is marked by sudden rapid growth in height and weight. Also, the young person experiences the emergence and accentuation of gender-specific hormonal and physical development. The young person looks less like a child and more like a physically and sexually mature adult. The effect of this rapid change is that the adolescent often becomes focused on his or her body. Peer interaction hits the peak of importance in adolescence. It progresses in later adolescence and early adulthood as the depth and quality of these relationships mature based on common values and beliefs. If an adolescent is able to make friends and belong to a mutually supportive peer group, he or she is likely to successfully adjust in other areas of development. Peers play the primary supportive role for emotional development. They help youth to begin to define who they are and how they fit into the broader community. And of course, romantic interests become more prominent. Before adolescence, children's thinking tends to be more concrete. They need concrete examples of situations and problems before they can solve them. During adolescence, young people can understand abstraction. They can consider more hypothetical situations and what-ifs. During the course of adolescence, individuals establish adult vocational goals, join the workforce, develop independent identities, begin to plan for and imagine their futures, and forge new relationships with mentors and role models. Adolescents who experience trauma may feel that they are weak, strange, or childish, or going crazy because of their bouts of fear or exaggerated physical responses. This may lead them to even further isolation, anxiety, and depression. They may feel embarrassed by their fears or exaggerated physical responses. They may believe that they are unique and alone in their pain and suffering. They may feel intense anger, experience low self-esteem and helplessness, engage in aggressive or disruptive behavior, experience sleep disturbances marked by late-night studying, television watching, or partying, engage in reckless or self-destructive behaviors such as drug or alcohol abuse, cutting themselves, or having unprotected sex. They may have difficulty imagining or planning for any kind of future, and instead live in the moment without regard to consequences. In adulthood, the brain continues to develop and learn from experiences. In particular, the ability to engage in dialectical thought, the ability to appreciate the complexity of situations and to try to resolve two opposing ideas. For example, the desire to be independent and the desire to be taken care of. Adolescents may be quick to judge an idea as right or wrong, good or bad. But in adulthood, we become better able to weigh the pros and cons of ideas or situations with more flexibility. During this time, adults with IDD may experience a lot of transitions from school into work or other training programs, transitions from pediatric to adult healthcare systems, transitions to more independent living and social interactions. This is also a time when many adults experience the aging of their parents, which can result in additional transitions, or the loss of their parents, which can result in significant traumatic grief. Trauma's impact can include difficulty imagining or planning for the future, decreased motivation for learning or working, difficulties with trust, isolation, and social withdrawal. We now turn to a discussion of the developmental task of older age and the impact of trauma during this developmental window. The good news is that the life expectancy of people with IDD has been increasing over the decades. policies that have led to increased access to healthcare, enhanced community-based supports and services, and reductions in environmental and social barriers to participation in the community are just a few reasons that people with IDD are now living into their 60s and beyond. Unfortunately, there's still work to be done, as research has shown that life expectancy for adults with IDD is about 20 years less than the general population. Older adults often strive to maintain as much independence as possible, and the ability to do so is associated with increased longevity. Older age comes with increased medical and physical changes that require changes in routines and activity levels. Older adults may start to experience changes in health, cognition, and memory, which may be distressing to some. Critical psychosocial development tasks during this time include generativity and meaning-making. Generativity is the need to be productive and give back to others, often younger generations. It can include continuing to work, volunteer, care for others, and have meaningful social connections, parenting, and grandparenting. It is also a time when a person looks back over their life and tries to make sense of it, or find meaning in it. Erikson called this integrity versus despair. To what extent can we look back over our life and feel like it meant something? Older adults with and without IDD may be more prone to medical trauma, grief, and loss-related traumas, institutionalization, and/or elder abuse. Much of what we know about the effects of trauma in older age, we know because of research with older veterans. Older adults who experience trauma earlier in life may have late-onset stress symptomology, or LOSS. It's associated with increased thoughts and memories of early trauma. They may be more sensitive to new stressors, such as retirement, loss of loved ones, or increased medical concerns. There appears to be an association between traumatic stress and cognitive functioning in older adults, but the direction of that relationship is not well understood. Some studies have suggested that pre-existing traumatic stress may increase risk for dementia. Others suggest that dementia may exacerbate PTSD symptoms. It may be hard to identify symptoms of trauma, like hypervigilance or flashbacks, because they may be mistaken for delirium or dementia. Together, traumatic stress and the associated changes in mood, behavior, and cognition may lead to decreased independence and greater difficulty with making meaning of their life. Therefore, it is important to find ways to promote these healthy developmental tasks by increasing independence, connection with younger generations, and reflecting on and making sense of the person's life. We are going to introduce you to 5 different adults. We're going to keep referring back to these adults throughout the training. Meet Jacqueline. She's a 34-year-old woman from El Paso, Texas. Austin is a 22-year-old man from Cincinnati, Ohio. Joey is a 30-year-old man from Wichita, Kansas. Katie is a 35-year-old woman from Madison, Wisconsin. And Trevelyan is a 45-year-old man from Detroit, Michigan. Throughout this module, we've been discussing the complexity of development, the types of development, the typical developmental stages, and how trauma experienced during these developmental stages may have impacted adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We'll consider another example here.